Greetings, folks. This is the Law of Fojo podcast. I am your host, Robert Fojo. I'm a lawyer turned legal and political commentator. This is the show that is more like a classroom. I advance conservatism for a new generation. I teach you that liberalism is the disease, much worse than coronavirus, and conservatism is the cure. I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm thrilled to be here with you today because I have a very special guest. He is a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives. He's running for the 1st Congressional District in New Hampshire. This is Julian Acciard. Julian, welcome to the program. How you doing?
Thank you for having me on. I'm doing pretty good. It's a nice day. It looks like maybe, knock on wood, we might be towards the end of the winter finally.
I am very happy with the weather today. I don't know if you know about me, but I'm originally from Miami, so moved up here about 12 years ago. I still have not gotten used to the weather up here. So whenever it dips below, 60, it's very painful for me. So I'm ecstatic that the temperature today is approaching 70. I have plans to go play some basketball with my
Uh,
son later and enjoy the weather. So I
my
definitely
wife
second that.
is from San Diego. I completely understand.
San Diego, I've been there a few times. It's I love the weather out there because it's just perfect, but it's so expensive out there, right?
Oh, it's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. As soon as I got off active duty and I had the opportunity to move back home, I did. It's the same amount of money I could spend on a house that I spent to buy my house here.
Right.
I bought my house with 3 acres, and I know my neighbors, and I can be left alone if I want to, or I can be as cordial as I want to. Out there, you have no land whatsoever. My master bedroom at one of the houses I looked at looked into the master bedroom of the house next to me, and we probably could have reached out the windows and high fived each other. It was really, really disturbing.
Why don't we start there? So are you a New Hampshire native?
Yes,
Where are you from in New Hampshire?
Atkinson.
Okay. And so
Atkinson.
what
We went to. I went to Timberlane. My dad, my aunts, and uncles all went to Timberlane as well.
Okay, nice. It's at some point I think you joined the military, is that right?
Yep. I joined the United States Marine Corps little after graduating high school. I knew after 9/11 that I wanted to join the military. And to be honest, it's a family legacy. 140 years of military service. Every generation serves both sides of the family. And we take service to our country very, very seriously. So for me, it's not a talking point. It's how we live.
Well, I respect that greatly. I have some family members of my own who joined the military. I deeply respect that. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Um,
I appreciate
what
it, especially these days.
Absolutely. So why did you join the Marines in particular over other branches of the military?
One of my favorite, so two of my favorite military movies growing up were Heartbreak Ridge and Full Metal Jacket.
That
So I grew up watching those, and there was something about being a Marine. The way I viewed, and I knew my dad. I used to hang out with my dad and some of the older gentlemen in town, and there were a couple Marines, and I just loved the way military members we're separate branches. We all compete with each other and we all talk crap to each other.
mm,
But at the end of the day, Marines are the best, and everyone knows it. So
that's the joke, right?
I wanted, yeah, I mean, I wanted to go overseas and I wanted to go to combat because in my younger years, I thought that if I served and I fought the war, that maybe my siblings might not have to. Little did I know growing up that that's not the case. As educated as I was, there was a little bit of naivety that existed. Now,
Right.
having gone over, joined the Marines, and the other thing was the brotherhood that I noticed growing up is you stop being Air Force, you stop being Army, but they're the Special Forces community, you never stop being Special Forces. And the Marines, you never stop being a Marine. No matter what generation I run into a Marine, and it's like we've lived our entire lives together and we serve together, and it's just a brotherhood that it's a fraternity that exists through life, and I love it. I still talk to all the people in my unit. We keep in touch on a regular basis. At the end of April, I'm supposed to go out for a guys trip where we lost so many guys to opioids and suicide that
Mm,
we decided to start getting back together because we realized that all the therapy in the world doesn't help us deal with our stuff, with our issues, but the brotherhood can.
right.
So we started getting together once a year to be there for each other, to keep everybody on track and keep us all moving forward. And it's kept us all very, very productive. And we're there to help each other out. And it's been a great asset. So
That sounds very appealing, and I've heard that a lot from former service members. Um, I truly admire it, because I obviously never went into the military or did anything like that. And I've heard a lot about the brotherhood, the connection you form with these people, with your mates, and it's something that never goes away. You have that, you establish that, right from the get-go, and it's something that never goes away for the rest of your lives. You will have that brotherhood for the rest of your life, right?
oh yeah, it's I would like to say, people say it's one of those intangible things, but it
Mhm.
is very tangible. You can feel it. You're in a room full of service members, especially like I ran into a guy. I was just having a glass of bourbon at the end of my day, finished auditing my employees, and I just sat. I was like, you know what? I'll stop in, watch the game for a minute, have a drink, and then go home.
Mm,
And I ended up talking to a Army veteran who was overseas in Iraq at the same time as me, and we started talking about the things that we experienced, that we
mhm,
saw, and everything, and very, very similar experiences. And it was like we immediately connected on that level where we understood each other, even though my wife's been with me 11 years. She knows me better than pretty much anybody, and even she still cannot relate to what we dealt with over there. So that brotherhood is necessary, because no matter how much you
mhm.
explain to a civilian what it was like to be in uniform, what it was like to serve overseas, and the things that we saw and experienced, it just doesn't connect the same. And that's the reason why therapy for veterans returning overseas doesn't work out the way it's planned to, is because it is a very unique experience in and of
Mhm.
itself.
Yeah. Where were you stationed?
My main base stateside was Camp Pendleton, but over in
Okay.
Iraq, it was Al Taqaddum. We did missions in Naqib and Mosul, missions through Ramadi, Fallujah, Baghdad, a couple convoy security to Al Assad, and things like that. So we got my platoon specifically got around pretty much the majority of Iraq. We did
Sounds like
stuff
it.
like convoy escorts, executive protection, EOD and QRF, raids, patrols, FOB security for special operations out in the middle of nowhere, and we did quite a bit.
What years were you over there?
Oh, 708, 0809.
Okay. And so what brought you guys out to California after you were discharged from the military?
Well, Camp Pendleton, California is North County, San Diego.
Oh, sorry. So
Um,
that's so
it,
you were out there obviously at the beginning, but
yeah,
you stayed out there, right?
yeah, we stayed out there for a couple years because my wife is from San Diego, and I tried to keep
Mm,
her as close to her family as possible. But the problem is, California is just so expensive. I was working 80
yeah.
plus hours a week, and I was spinning my tires, and I was going nowhere. When I first got out, I was medically retired, so I was a disabled veteran.
Mhm.
We lost everything. We were homeless. Then finally, we were living in a garage with my wife and my newborn son, and I was finally able to get back to using my GI Bill, go to school.
Right.
Um, my background is Homeland Security and anti-terrorism, behavioral psychology, and I was trying to, and that's how I got into executive protection and high threat protection, focusing in around Juarez, Mexico City, the border, LA, San Diego, things of that sort. And I did private security for a while as well. And while I was doing this and I was engaging in my studies and stuff, I had the opportunity to finally get back to New Hampshire because
Mhm.
moving back here was always the goal, but I was trying to keep my wife as close to her family as possible because her family are very, very, very close. And like I said, everyone in my family serves, so we're able to still have that connection and be away from each other and still remain just as close. I used to talk to my mother and my father probably 2, 3 times a week. Same with my siblings, and because I'm the oldest of five, so and
Okay.
then
I'm the oldest of
finally,
4, so I get that.
yeah. So as soon as I got the opportunity to move back here, I did, and I did a DoD security on Pease Air National Guard base.
Okay. Mexico, that's the area you referenced is a very dicey, dangerous territory.
Yeah.
Do you have any interesting stories, um,
Um,
that you've got in your bank that you'd like to tell?
well, in Mexico, you see the type of stuff that you would expect to see in a third world country. I
Yeah.
mean, when journalists try to expose the cartels or government corruption, they end up hanging from bridges.
Yeah.
Um, like when you toe the line against the cartel, you end up chopped up in tortilla barrels.
Right, right.
The type of stuff
Jesus.
that these cartels do, they engage in the most insane brutality. And you have some protection gigs, they'll go down there and they drive around in the big black Suburbans and
Mhm.
Tahoes, and they get shot at a lot because nobody drives Suburbans and Tahoes down there.
Right, right.
Drive big blacked out, obviously Secret Service and protection detail vehicles. Uh, so what we would do is we would drive Range Rovers and I'm sorry,
Mhm.
not Range Rover, like Forerunners, Toyota Forerunners and stuff,
Yeah.
which are far more common down there. But I mean, you see the drug dealing, you see the tenacity of the cartels, you see, I mean, just when I was active duty, we go down to Tijuana to drink and stuff. The Some of the places, the police here are just as corrupt as the cartels, as the and the government
I'm
officials are
sure,
right there too.
I'm sure.
So we saw, I mean, you see coyotes rushing people to the border, you see
Mm.
floods of people coming over the border. Even if you're on the stateside area, you hear the gunshots on the other side of the border. And you realize real quick how nice and how easy things are here in
Right.
America. I mean, not even Chicago is as bad as Juarez.
Well, you certainly realize why so many of them over there wanna come over here and
Mhm.
find desperate ways to do it, right?
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it's an entire industry.
yeah,
I mean, remittances back to Mexico is an entire industry. It's a huge portion of Mexico's economy. That's why they have no interest in stopping it.
yeah.
That's why
Um,
this is what made Donald Trump unique. The only thing that we probably should have engaged in more was holding corporations who hire illegal immigrants more accountable
sure. I think that's
and
a
fighting
really
harder against the sanctuary city policies because these sanctuary city policies are not just putting nonviolent offenders back on the streets, they're putting violent offenders back on the streets where the
mm,
government is refusing to cooperate and hand over violent offenders just because they happen to be illegal immigrants. Imagine if that were any other demographic of people. The entire country would be in an uproar. But this has been politicized to the point where common sense is no longer a part of the conversation. We should
wha
not be we should not be even considering the idea of having illegal immigrants and cartel members who have committed murder and rape and human trafficking back on the streets just because they happen to be illegal immigrants. No, if anything, we should be deporting them immediately. We shouldn't even
Wow.
be putting them in prison here. We should be kicking them back over the border,
Right.
and we should be shutting down the border entirely.
I think I agree with you that that's the one thing that made Trump very unique, and it's an issue that resonated so powerfully among the conservative base, and it gave him, and he really knew how to sell it. He understood how to market himself, market his campaign, and that issue, he really, latched onto that issue and made it a signature piece of his platform. Why why are we, and you're saying "we" in a, you're using the word "we" in a very generic way, but I think we know, you and I know who you're referring to. Why do we allow this to happen? What's the motivation behind allowing all these people to come into this country illegally and stay here and not do anything about it?
Well, the biggest lobbyist for illegal immigrants to come into the United States is actually the Chamber of Commerce. It's cheap labor. And it's not just them coming in
Mhm,
from the southern border illegally. It's we also ship people in from China, from India to work in our tech sectors at a sizable percentage less than what we would pay our own graduate students coming out
mhm,
of IT schools in the tech sector here domestically. And it's to displace wages. So essentially what you're doing is you're capping the ultimate wage to which somebody can rise, because you have people in middle management that are constantly dragging that down, and at the bottom you're cutting the basement out from under
mhm.
what the average person should get paid, because you gotta look at the fact that in Mexico these people could get paid $2 an hour,
Right.
and in some countries we have over, I believe, 130 countries have come over the southern border. A lot of these countries you can get $2 a day or
Mhm.
$2 a week. So working for $8 an hour or 7.50 an hour or $12 an hour, they're making buku money. And they're willing to suffer too. They're willing to live 14, 16 to an apartment with just cots and blankets on the floor to be able to make that money and send remittances back to their home countries,
Yeah.
or be an anchor to bring more people in. And the problem is we haven't actually been enforcing our laws. We have good immigration laws on the books. We just don't enforce them. And
I
to
agree with
me,
that.
that's in the face of equal protection under the law, because laws are being levied against the citizens of the country, but they're not being enforced against citizens, or against those who are not citizens of the country. So we have to beg our politicians to do a damn thing for us. Meanwhile, they hand anything that a legal immigrant wants, not needs, but wants, on silver platter. And it is absolutely, it bugs the ever living shit out of me that this is even a conversation that we have to have, because it seems so common sense. But the
Right.
left, on the other hand, there's two reasons. One, they want amnesty, because if they can, the left, people don't realize this, but the left has actually been losing voters over the years. They say if you're young and you're not a progressive, you don't have a heart.
Right.
And if you're old and if you're in your 20s and you're not a progressive, you don't have a heart. But if you're in your 30s and 40s and you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain.
Yeah.
Get mugged by reality,
Mhm.
and you quickly realize how your lofty ideals of utopia don't really fit. And that goes, I want to be completely clear about this, because that goes for a libertarian, anarcho libertarian utopia,
Mhm.
and a Marxist authoritarian utopia. Neither is possible. One, people are not intellectually pure, they're not well researched, and we are increasingly apathetic. And it has to do with this instant gratification culture that we got ourselves in through all the electronics and everything that we have in our daily lives. It's constant serotonin dumping into our brain. It makes us completely irrational and easily manipulated. And it makes us apathetic. So we have not been doing one of the things our founding fathers, a republic, if you can keep it, we haven't been keeping it.
That's a great,
The average person complains about everything that goes on in DC,
Yeah.
dark money in politics, but less than 5% of the country donates even a dollar to a candidate, a PAC, a party. The majority of the people in the country don't get out, they don't protest, they don't wave signs, they don't
Mhm.
go to school board meetings, town council meetings, budget committee meetings. So the stuff, even the local government stuff that affects you the most, affects your bills and your daily lives the most, is the stuff that you don't pay attention to. The highest voter turnout is for the stuff that is supposed to affect you the least, the
Right.
president.
Right.
If the government is structured, or if we followed the government structure the way it was designed, your local government has the most say over your life, and the president should have the least say over your life on a daily
Right.
basis. He's the
And
most
where
powerful. He should be
yeah,
the most
and
restrictive in
where
what
was
he.
that that was so prevalent over the last 2 years. What I've been telling a lot of
Mhm.
people, especially with these all of these lawsuits that I participated in and assisted parents with in challenging school district measures and local measures,
Yep.
the one point I kept, people would ask me, "How do we fight this stuff?" And my response was, "Well, right now, unfortunately, your only option is to file a lawsuit. But
Yeah.
you people need to start paying attention. You have been completely bypassing all of this. You have lost control of what our schools are teaching our children. You have lost control over what our local municipal governments are doing because all you do is pay attention to the federal election cycle every 4 years. And then when all this stuff's
Yep.
happening at the local level, you're like, what the hell's going on? What are they teaching my kid? What books are my kid reading? What, you can put a mask on my kid and over my say? What is they have lost control
Yeah.
because they haven't been paying attention. And I think that's a great point that you just raised.
So I used to break this down. I wrote a paper in college as intercultural communications, and it was intercultural communications and psychology. And I broke it down into the era. World War II era, men came back from war, they went right back into the workforce. And there were a sizable amount of women who went into the workforce during World War I and World War II. During Korea, same thing happened. More women went into the workforce. During Vietnam, not only did more women go into the workforce, but not all the men that came home went back into the workforce. What you ended up with is where it used to be socially acceptable to pay one man enough money for a family of four,
Mhm.
and that used to be the standard. Now you had the workforce doubled overnight, because over time, because now women are more accepted into the workforce. And it's not a bad thing that women are allowed to work, or that they do work, and that they're very successful. They're
Mhm.
actually out earning their male counterparts right now,
Mhm.
per industry. But the problem is, when you have both parents who are in the workforce, no one's passing down morals and standards to their children. No one is
Great point.
there at home to maintain, and it creates a level of apathy and paying attention to what we do in our home lives. This is how you see two parents come home from work, both tired. Now, me and my wife both work, so this is a good example. My
Right.
wife is a preschool teacher. She comes home from work from dealing with kids all damn day.
Sure.
I have
God
three
bless
kids
her.
of my own, and she wants to sit down on the couch. She wants to have a drink and
Mhm.
just play a Sudoku for a minute and relax.
Mhm.
The problem is, what are your kids doing while they're doing that?
Right. They're on their
Did you
screens.
look at their homework to see what they're
Yeah.
learning? Have you looked at their books to see what the curriculum is? Have you questioned your schools? Are you so tired from work that you disengage from everything in life, and you
Mhm.
focus on just how you're trying to relax, where you go from work to forgetting all your other responsibilities outside of work, and you focus on just trying to stress relieve so that you can go back to your grind tomorrow. And it leaves our children, who've over the past 60 years have been so indoctrinated to where it's an assembly line, but the assembly line doesn't turn out well functioning adults who are able to critically think, engage in society, be productive, accomplish things, who aspire to something great. We have essentially killed the dreams of young people coming out of schools. They assume that they can't be successful. The left has hidden the ladder to success, so they think that there's no way to climb. So the left is basically, by hiding that ladder, they've destroyed the hopeful capitalist. And if these children, this next generation, don't see a way to climb to be successful,
Yeah.
we lose the country, because that's how Marxism works. They knew,
Hmm.
they tried it in the 30s, didn't work because the culture wasn't there. People were largely self-sufficient. And if you could see the ladder to climb to success, you'll take the ladder to climb to greater success than the guarantee, which is the way welfare works. I could give you a hand up so that you can be successful on your own, or I can do the way the system actually works right now, where we give you just enough to buy a 6-pack of beer and a pack of cigarettes and stay exactly where you are,
Right.
subservient to everything that I want you to do. And you'll vote for me over and over and over again, because I will keep giving you those services and keeping you exactly where you are, sustained but subservient. And
Right.
sustained but subservient is a direct contradiction to the entirety of what this country is built upon.
I think
Now,
it's a
you take
great.
that home dynamic,
Yeah.
that also leads into why husband and wives are increasingly getting divorced over finances, not seeing each other, a break in the relationship, so on and so forth. I like to say, me and my wife have been married for 11 years. I've been married 3 times to the same woman. Every time my wife has changed and I have changed. Every time we've evolved, I reaffirm my love for my wife.
That's a beautiful thing. I think that's a great point. What you're saying, I think, is it I think very vividly explains the key distinction between the left and conservatism. And I think Republicans, conservatives are always labeled by the media, the left. We're racists, bigots, and homophobes, and that's the labels that they affix to us, and they run with those. Republicans and conservatives, I think, often don't define and explain themselves very well. I think you're doing a great job of that here, from the perspective of what the left tries to pass off as a platform, and they essentially try to group everybody up. They put you into groups. They tell you why you can't succeed and why you need government to help you succeed. And what they fail to understand, and what human history has demonstrated, is that the source of wealth, the source of success, is not government. It's never been government. It's been rugged individualism. And conservatives and Republicans, but really conservatives, and the philosophy of conservatism is based on individuals. We love
Yep.
individuals. We think we're all unique. I believe that all of you can succeed. And the best way to help people succeed is to give them the freedom and the flexibility to succeed, i.e., get the government out of the way.
Yeah. I break conservatism down, and I break the difference between the ideals and the principles, the movement, and the Republican Party. So conservative principle, there's 3 different types of conservatism. There is social conservatism, which is the most prevalent that people are aware of. That is how ideally society should interact with each other, based on Judeo-Christian principles. And I want to preface, the Judeo-Christian principle that our society is based on the most is
Hmm.
choice, the individual right to choice. Everything in the Bible stresses the individual right to choice and the individual responsibility, the responsibility of the individual, and accountability, at the ultimate accountability to your maker at the end of your life, to God. We have throughout the there's a lot of history behind it, and I can get into that in a minute.
Sure.
But now that I've defined that, uh, conservative principles of governance are the conservation of the Constitution, the Republic, and the inalienable rights of individuals to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now you see how the conjunction, they work side by side,
Hmm.
and ideally you want You want people in both. You want social conservatives to run for office while still understanding the limitations on government authority and not trying to legislate social conservatism. The reason why you don't legislate social conservatism is because legislation of culture is wrong. It is antithetical to the birth and the foundation of our country. The founding fathers had great criticisms for the church, not
Hmm.
for faith, not for belief in God, but for the church, because people abuse the power of the church to manipulate people.
Hmm.
And when you start to legislate faith, now you get into a scenario where you're being just as authoritarian. You're just being authoritarian in a direction you agree with.
Right.
And we fled that in England. So the
Absolutely.
foundation of the country was fleeing exactly that. So I
Hmm.
tell people I don't want a Marxist authoritarian government any more than I want a Christian theocratic authoritarian government. I want a liberty-based government based on the principles, the tried and true principles that they didn't start with this country. Our founding fathers just identified principles that are that are constant throughout time. And where this legislation, specifically in the Republican Party, we screw things up when it comes to race and when it comes to history and narratives, because we forget half of our history is the
Hmm.
original pro-black, pro-woman, pro-Hispanic, pro-Asian party. We were the Big Tent Party. We were founded because the reason we were able to be a Big Tent Party is because at the core of the center of the party was liberty.
Yeah.
Was
That
liberty.
I,
We
I love that
mixed
you
up
just said
the
that.
idea of Dr. King's Dr.
Yeah.
King's statement, content of character over the color of your skin.
Hmm.
He never said, do not see the color of someone's skin, do not
Hmm.
acknowledge the differences in our complexion and cultures and so on and so forth. He meant that the content of the character should not take a ding or be propped up
Hmm.
solely because of your look, of the way you look, or the culture you came from or belong to. So
Right.
that is, you look at everyone as an individual.
Hmm.
That was what he was trying to say, and that's what the party was built on, which
Hmm.
is how we had Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, and we had people like Carter G. Woodson. But over the years, and there's a lot of history behind it, over the years we have shunned that very same history. The left tries to co-opt it, and
Right.
instead of going, oh, so perfect example, Black History Month. Negro History Week was created by Carter G. Woodson, and it was turned into Black History Month by Gerald Ford. Every time Black History Month comes around, we start making arguments for why our own Republican legacy shouldn't exist. Our, like, this is our legacy. Carter G. Woodson made Negro History Week
Yeah.
to honor Abraham Lincoln's freeing of the slaves. The
Yeah.
Black National Anthem was originally the Negro Anthem, named so at the commemoration of Abraham Lincoln's birthday in 1901.
Right. Well,
That
people
is a
people often
celebration of Republican history. Same
yeah
with
people
Juneteenth.
people often forget. People often forget. I don't think most people don't know that the Republican Party was founded as an anti-slavery party.
Yep,
It was formed in 1854 to oppose the expansion of slavery into other territories that had been acquired through the Louisiana Purchase.
yep.
But if you listen to a Democrat today, you would never know that. But that was the
Well,
purpose of the party, was founded to oppose the expansion of slavery.
they're able to get away with it because we don't know our own party history.
Agreed.
So in 1877 through 1890, there was a radical lily white Republican movement
Mhm.
within the party. And I explained this to people by going, there were two factions. There were the black and tans and the lily white Republican movement. The lily
Mhm.
white Republican movement began in 1877 by purging black representation and power within the Republican Party, because black and white people built the party side by side
Right.
together,
Right.
along with women. Of all things, black people, women, and conservative white men, who were the power structure at the time, built the party together.
Mhm.
Then the establishment, starting in Texas, started to purge people, because as the Democrats moved towards economic centers and cities and urban centers, we started to try and capture rural areas, and we were known as the party of the Negro at the time.
Right.
So you couldn't capture, they wanted to, in order to change, capture a new power base, a new voting populace, they started to purge these black representatives out of the party so that they would no longer be known as the party of the Negro. And yet black people still voted Republican all the way up until the 1930s. The last black the last black federal representative was 1936 until 1968.
So why do
Until
you think?
1968, and it was Democrat from then on, and that had to do with W.E.B. Du Bois getting elected, Woodrow Wilson, and FDR. He wasn't successful, Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson segregated the federal government and everything, and then you had FDR instituted the New Deal,
Mhm.
which created. Now, these are some talking points that the left talks about: redlining, gentrification. FDR created redlining and gentrification.
Mhm.
When Pete Buttigieg was talking about how the highway system was racist, FDR literally, they mapped out, they just built highways along the borders and train tracks along the borders and edges of historically black neighborhoods in order to segregate the society. And all that served was a physical boundary in order to stop investment, banking investment into those areas.
Right.
Democrat segregated during the Dixiecrat South,
Mhm.
segregated black communities. Does it sound familiar? So all this systemic racism that the left is talking about, it's real.
The
It
well,
just
the
wasn't
rate no, it wasn't on this side. The rate
conservative.
right, racism, I mean, historically, racism has been almost exclusively, and I'm not saying, there are people that
Yeah,
that aren't guilty of it on both sides, but racism has been exclusively on the left side of the aisle. I mean, the history is
yeah,
there. They have, we had presidents, we had congressmen, we had well-known Democrats who were perpetuating this this uh, this slight
not
on
just
our
that.
history.
And
It's always been on that side, and
yeah,
somehow the history of conservatism, the Republican Party, the reason why it was founded, the big tent that you refer to, which is we love individuals. We think everyone has a
yeah.
chance and should have a chance for success. All that's been erased, and somehow they have co-opted the African American community into and somehow convinced them, the majority of them, to vote for these failed policies time and time again.
Well, that is the legacy of the Lily White movement, was
Mhm,
so that was the establishment, what I call the original Lincoln Project, screwed over the base, who
mhm,
didn't who liked the fact that we freed the slaves, who had no problem with it. They screwed over the base in order to gain power. The base were the black and tans, the original
mhm,
MAGA movement, the original Tea Party movement, who were fighting back against it. As the power structure changed within the party, all that happened was Republicans just stopped asking for the black vote. Up until Eisenhower was the last Republican prior to Donald Trump to make a serious go at the black vote in general.
yeah,
And all Eisenhower did was attempt to solve their problems using conservative principles of governance. Donald Trump did the same thing. He tried to solve their
absolutely.
problems using conservative principles of governance. Go figure, Donald Trump moved the ball forward and grew the party bigger than anybody else in history. Why?
Yeah,
Because as a businessman, he saw a problem in solution, not
mhm,
political play. How do I get reelected? How do I get donations out of this? He went problem and solution. And there were people
mhm,
along the way who thwarted that, and there are people along the way who helped that.
mhm,
Some of the biggest names that everyone knows were the people who heard it, and some of the people who were behind the scenes were the people who helped them the most. And that's the difference, is the people who step out in order to make a dollar. Those are usually the people who are not being productive. The people who work behind the scenes to get things done, those are usually the people who are doing the
yeah,
work and deserve the accolades but don't actually ask for them. So Donald Trump moved the ball in a astounding manner, but the way the left accomplished everything they did was Immediately after the civil rights movement, everyone, all those Marxist civil rights leaders that infiltrated the Black Panthers and took it over, that infiltrated all these other organizations and took them over, they immediately went into the power structure and became the Congressional Black Caucus.
Right.
And they started immediately calling conservatives racist. We went from being
Mhm.
called liberals to being called conservatives and saying that we want to conserve whiteness, which is baffling to me because
Yeah.
that was literally, they started calling us racist as soon as the civil rights movement was over.
Yeah.
Now, our problem is we have too many sackless people like Mitt Romney, who every time they get called racist, they say,
They
"Oh
apologize.
shucks, guys, come on,
They
don't
apologize.
call me
Yeah.
racist."
Yeah.
Yeah, they apologize, and
Yeah.
I'm saying, I'm like, no. If someone calls you racist, they start calling you names, you should not give them a valid argument and start going on the defensive and trying
Mhm.
to rationalize why you're not a racist because you just gave them the power. Instead, say F you and have a nice day.
Right. Or call them.
I
What
mean,
I like, what I do, because, I supported Trump as well, and I was labeled a racist by I have a very many liberal friends. Some of them are now
yeah,
former friends because of the fact that I supported Donald Trump in 2016, and I got labeled a racist. And I I agree. You have a lot of these Republicans who automatically shift into apology mode the minute they're called a racist. When what you
yeah,
should instead do what you just suggested. F you, go about your day, or call them on the tactic. I mean, that is an attack the messenger, an ad hominem attack.
yeah,
They're not engaging on whatever substantive position that politician is trying to advance. They're being labeled
yeah.
a racist. So that is an ad hominem attack. You're just attacking the messenger. You're insulting them rather than engaging them on the actual issue. So you should just ignore that nonsense and press forward with whatever it is you're trying to advocate. And that a lot of these Mitt Romney's one of them. I used to, I voted for him in 2012. I voted for him against McCain in the primary in '08. He has become such a watered down milk toast politician who's constantly capitulating to the left and trying to appease the left. He's been such a disappointment, and there's so many Republicans like that. And we need to resist that nonsense that we're racist. We need
Well,
to
that's
educate
that's
people
that
on the
Lincoln
true history of the
Project type
party.
thinking.
I'm sorry, go
That's
ahead.
that Lincoln Project type thinking. The
Mhm.
status quo Republican. They don't want to move the ball forward for conservatism. They don't want to get back to the Constitution. They view the Constitution just as much of a hindrance as the
Yeah.
left does. The only difference is that the left is at least honest about the fact that they don't give a damn about the Constitution. They don't like it. The establishment on the right, they pretend to like it when it's convenient for them, when it makes them feel high and mighty when they make an argument. I'm a constitutionalist. I want to get back to the Constitution. I think we should have limited government, and the country's structure should be structured the way it was founded. These people are not like that. They're not like that, and they'll never be like that because
Right.
they don't view any restriction on their power as a valid restriction. Look at how
Well,
we
what they
declare war. How often do we allow an executive to
Mhm.
declare war around the world and start dropping bombs on people without any congressional approval whatsoever? Why
Right.
do we allow Congress to pass bills that were not argued on the House floor at all? They were decided behind closed doors in committee.
Mhm.
Like
Exactly.
it's the most ridiculous process, and that's the reason why we get screwed is we have been so conditioned to lower the bar on what we expect from candidates, what we expect from people running for office. They don't understand the foundational documents of this country. They don't understand the difference between principles and platform planks and talking points and rhetoric. They don't understand when they're being manipulated.
Mhm.
When somebody tells you, I'm going to ban the Department of Education, guess what? They lied to you.
Of
They
course.
lied to you because one, I guarantee they don't have a plan to get it done. Two, they don't have they're not actually, they wouldn't actually vote for it if it came up for a vote if they thought it was going to get passed, which is one of the sleight of hands politicians do. You propose a bill, like say a ban on abortion, which shouldn't
Mhm.
be done at the federal level anyways. It should be passed down to the states where it should have been to begin
Right.
with. But say a federal ban on abortion.
Mhm.
Okay. straight out the gate, 80% of Republicans in Congress, serving in Congress, are against a ban on abortion. They talk a good game, but they wouldn't actually pass it. So it's going to go to the House floor and get maybe 20 votes. So will you suffer any consequences by voting for it? No. You
No.
won't suffer any consequences because you're in a red district, and it is no different than performance art for your base. You're proposing a bill you know damn well won't pass just to make your base happy, instead of working on trying to solve the reason why 80% of Republicans in Congress won't vote for it, instead of trying to get it passed back down to the states where we've actually been very successful at dialing it back.
Right. I think
So that's the
that's a
difference
great.
between people who use rhetoric and have strategies to get things done. I
Right.
have a economic revitalization plan to supplant China on the world stage and put China and Russia back in the corner where they belong.
Mm-hmm.
I have a plan to do it. I wrote my plan out. I have far more that goes into it. There's talking to the right people I can work with. I've talked to a lot of legislators and a lot of candidates running across the country about it. I go,
How do we?
but
So how?
then there's just talking about what Donald Trump did,
Mm-hmm.
which you can allude to what Donald Trump did, or you can explain to me how you understand why his policy worked.
Right.
Most candidates trying to get Trump's endorsement, they have no idea why he won or why he was successful or what he was doing, what magic he brought to the stage. They're all pretending to be the next Donald Trump. No one can be the next Donald Trump. There is no next Donald Trump. The only thing we can all be is the best us. I'm the
Why?
best me. I can be the second best somebody else.
Why do you think Trump was so unique?
He was unique because when they tried to hit him with being a flawed individual,
Mm-hmm.
he went with it. He owned it.
Yeah.
And he looked, like I said, he was a solutionary. He looked at a problem as, how can I solve this problem while still keeping the Constitution and individual rights at play?
Mm-hmm.
That is the difference. He looked at it as, how can I solve this problem? And when they tried to hit him with language, he hit back. He was a counterpuncher.
Yeah.
So he didn't back down from a fight. Not everything that he did was productive, but I mean, some of the tweets were not productive, but criticizing overall, I'd say 97% of the time, his policy was on point. His
Mm-hmm.
tactics were on point. He fought, which is something that everyone wanted to see. He was always himself, regardless of who was watching. He was unapologetic about being who he is, and he fought to solve the problem and move the ball forward. And he was focused on growing the party. Those dynamics, understanding the difference between pretending to fight and actually fighting. Pretending to fight is going on TV and talking a lot of trash.
Yeah.
Actually fighting is having a plan to move the ball forward, to get government out of our daily lives, is
Right.
actually being able to legislate, build a coalition with people on our own side in order to get legislation passed.
Yeah. I
Like,
think that.
when I say I want to build bridges between us and voters,
Mm-hmm.
I want to build a bridge between conservatives and independents, between conservatives and libertarians. And for the moderate Democrats who think their party's left them, yeah, come over here. The water's warm. We're not going to bite you.
Yeah. Well, I think a
If you
part of.
want freedom, this is the
Yeah.
place to be.
In order to do that, I think it's very important to do what you're doing here right now with me. You're speaking very intelligently about a lot of these principles, a lot of the positions that conservatives have about the history of the party, about the everything you've just described. I think it's imperative to educate independents,
Mhm.
libertarians, just explain how much in common we actually have, because we have a lot more in common than we think. People tend
Yeah.
to put themselves into, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, with honestly, probably without even knowing 90% of what the party stands for. A short anecdote: one of the cases that I filed, it was against the city of Nashua 2 years ago, against the city's mask mandate. My client, now this would surprise a lot of people, he was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and he opposed a municipal mask mandate. And I told him what I was, and we had some very enlightening conversations about how much in common we actually have. Because when you think of Bernie Sanders and people who voted for Bernie Sanders, and he is a self-avowed socialist, you would think that you have nothing in common with Sanders or the people who vote for him. But surprisingly, there is a lot that we have in common with people. And it goes back to those first principles, that emphasis on the individual. And I think educating people
Yeah.
about that is imperative to growing the tent, as you've identified, but also building those bridges that you're talking about.
Well, I've found that discussing the solution to the problem is where we find our common ground. Like, for
True.
instance, there's an organization up here called Felons to Freedmen. And we were talking about it's obviously to get felons back productive in society once they get out of prison. And I said, that's great. He goes, really? You're a Republican? You're on board with this? I go, yes, being self-sufficient is a pinnacle of being a conservative. When you get out of prison, I need you to go out and get a job, be able to afford a roof over your head, put food on the table, and become a pillar of the community and start helping your fellow man and hopefully stopping young children and young boys from following the same path that you followed to get to
Right.
where you were. And in order to do that, I need you economically to be self-sufficient, and I need you mentally to be confident that you're going to be able to maintain that so that you can become productive in society again, and you can stop the next generation from following that path. He was on board with it. And this guy normally works with Democrats.
Yeah.
There's a Black Lives Matter guy. He's an independent because his party is not far left enough for him. He was talking over in Nashua about defunding the police. His name's Jordan Thompson. And I go, all right. He didn't know I was running for office at the time. And I go, so what do you see as a problem? And he explained to me policing, police brutality, so on and so forth. I go, okay, this is bridged easily through funding the police so that they have better training. When you have 90 days of training and you're expected to go out on the street and hopefully learn on the job without accidentally shooting a civilian, they don't get range time. They don't get hand-to-hand combat training. They don't get use of force and defensive tactics training. They do a lot of their stuff on their own, and it's because all the funding for this training is expensive. It gets cut from budgets. It's easy to dismiss it because you just go, oh, well, they went to the police academy. But in the military, I go to boot camp for 3 months. Then I get out of boot camp. I go to MCT, Marine Combat Training, or SOI, School of Infantry, for another few months. Then I go to my MOS school, my Marine Occupational Training. Then I go to my MOS school, Marine Occupational Specialty. I go to that school, and then I learn for months on end how to do my specific job in the military. Then when I get to my unit, I'm doing my job every day, and I'm continuously training. So you get to the point where you react instinctively the right way every single time. And I explained to him, don't defund the police, fund the police, give them better funding, better training, better mental health services. So when they walk into a room and they see a little girl that just got raped, and they see a mom who's a junkie over in the corner, dad's involved in domestic violence and stuff, they can look at this case, get the mental health issue, the mental health services they need, so that they're back on patrol without that trauma they just experienced affecting their next case.
Right.
I go, that's the difference. In addition to, we're conservatives, we believe in limited government, which means we don't pass laws that make 64-ounce sodas illegal, plastic straws illegal, friggin' jaywalking and stupid stuff like this, where you're messing with people over stuff that does not hurt interactions between other people in society. It's the well-meaning good that tears down the liberty of all. And that's the issue, is people on the conservative side, we assume that if something doesn't affect us, then we don't need to pay attention to it. A loss of liberty for one is a loss of liberty for all. Once the precedent has been set, the precedent is what will reign. Because when politicians tell you what is or is not constitutional, when they start describing what the Constitution says, most people are not going to go look up the Constitution and go, yeah, dude, that's not in there. That's not in there. Like, look at the impeachment debates. You know how many times people misquoted the Federalist Papers? I swear I was losing my mind. I read the Federalist Papers, the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, ratification debates, and anti-Federalist papers every year.
Mhm.
Every year to make sure I still understand the principles and the concepts. It's
Yeah.
not just the words. It's, do you understand the meaning of the words at the time in which they were written? Not how
Yeah.
we view them today, but what they meant back then, because that is what is supposed to determine how we view the law.
Yeah. People don't. This idea, the first principles that informed the Constitution, the delegates that went to that constitutional convention, the belief system that they came to that convention with, people today don't truly appreciate how revolutionary that idea was at the time. That this idea that our rights don't come from government, they don't come from some some ruler, some king. We're born with those rights, and
Yeah.
the purpose of government isn't to bestow rights on us, it's to protect those rights. That's the purpose of government. And what we witnessed over the last 2 years with all of these overreaching restrictions that impinged on so many facets of our lives, like you said, a loss of liberty for one is a loss of liberty for all. We saw so much encroachment on our freedoms over the last 2 years because people in power, and then just people, everyday people like you and I, have lost a complete understanding of what the purpose of government is supposed to be. It's not there to dictate to us. It's there to protect our rights. And we enter into this social contract whereby we give up some of those rights to establish these social services, this government structure. But the point of all those systems is to protect us. And
Yeah.
that's foreign to so many people today, especially elected officials.
Like, most people are not actual socialists. What these kids are is they're young, they're naive, and they believe in a better world. But
Mm,
they've been duped because their view of capitalism, what Marx had described as capitalism, is crony capitalism. It
mm,
is unaccountable corporations who manipulate and destroy people's lives for profit, in conjunction with government officials who cover for these corporations in order to make it happen. Kind of like how everyone in Congress complains about big tech on both sides of the aisle. They complain about big tech. The left is saying, well, they don't censor enough. The right is saying they censor too much. But you know what? Everyone goes and asks them for money.
mm,
Everyone goes and asks them for donations.
yeah,
And they had no problem helping these giant monopolies be created in the first place. Now there is a world conglomerate of a tech cartel, which is a group version of monopoly for those who don't understand economics. And they run the world. Essentially, they can shut down
yeah,
whoever they want.
yeah.
And this is where
It's a
we've
very
gotten, is
dangerous.
people don't understand. And I
Yeah,
want people to understand, you have a responsibility to look deeper. When you see a candidate running, ask them for their principles. Ask them if they understand policy. Ask them a real question about the office they're running for. I get asked local questions and I'm running for federal office. Asking
right.
for my, basically, I can go walk out of a meeting. If I didn't have principles of my own and feel it necessary to address only federal issues, I could walk out of most meetings having never even talked about federal legislation, who I would vote
Yeah,
for Speaker of the House, what committees I want to work on, what problems I plan to solve, how I view foreign policy, so on and so forth. With my background, I have the ability to look at things far in advance, and I can see things holistically, as I've explained very many issues here. But too often people fall for the, I'm starting a small business coalition that does nothing for small businesses.
yeah,
I'm starting an election coalition that does nothing to fix elections. I'm starting a uh, a suburban women's coalition. What does your coalition do for suburban women? Suburban women.
hmm
See, if I'm starting a coalition, it should be to do something for you to solve a problem, not for you to do something to support me.
Right.
By the nature of me being a good candidate in solving your problems, you should support me. If I can't solve your problems, don't support me. By all means, hold me accountable to everything I say and everything I do.
Mhm.
Research my policy.
If you were to prevail and win, what are your priorities? Or perhaps, like, let's do it this way. What are your top 3 priorities, when you get to DC?
First, I want to work on the Intel Committee, Armed Services Committee, and Oversight Committee. I think the best Speaker of the House that we could have right now is Jim Jordan.
Mhm.
When Jim Jordan is Speaker of the House. I joked early in the campaign about Dan Crenshaw because we got at the reality is talking about Speaker of the House or a Senate Majority Leader. We don't know who's actually going to have the chonies to run against Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy in the first place. A lot of times they run unopposed because
Mhm.
they leverage people behind closed doors before there's even a vote. So, but I want Jim Jordan because he is a strong conservative fighter who is productive, who stays productive, and he understands policy, as I've clearly exhibited today. But my issue is I want an economic revitalization plan. I want to continue Trump's Platinum Plan, pass the Balanced Budget Act, and pass a Legislative Transparency Act.
Mhm.
We should not have to beg to know what's inside a bill. We shouldn't have to vote on it without having read it or do one of these. You have to vote it to see what's in it.
Oh, I remember that
And we
line.
need to get down to single issue legislation.
Mhm. I So much of what happens over there, I don't know if I would ever, if I could survive as a congressman, because, so much of the stuff that happens up there or down there is just, beyond me. The idea of passing a 1,000-page bill and people, expecting legislators to read it, to read all of it and
Mm-hmm.
understand it and develop a view on it, and there are obviously very many different provisions in it that you may have different opinions on. The idea that someone is supposed to read all that and digest it, understand it, and then develop a position on it or portions of it in a matter of hours is asinine. It's absolutely asinine, and it seemed that happened
Yeah.
last week. And I think that's a very good point that you raise about the lack of transparency at the federal level with all of these issues is just, horrifying.
What it leads to is it leads to people passing a piece of legislation because it has their little pet project in it.
Right.
That's what it leads to. Is in order for me to vote on this bill that I'm not going to read, I have to put my little pet project in it. I have no desire to vote on any bill that I have not read. I would
Yeah.
not sign a contract I have not read. I would not hand somebody money for a service I have not received. Like it just flies in the face of common sense. So we need to get it to the point where it is single issue. We do know what's in it,
Mhm.
and it should be made available to the public 30 days prior to anybody voting on it. And it needs to be read aloud in its full text on the House floor. So,
Right.
all right, fine. You want to give me 24 hours to read this 2,000 page bill? That's fine. We're voting on it tomorrow, and you're going to read all 2,000 pages on the House floor.
Yeah. I think
Like
that's
that way,
very,
there's no
yeah.
excuses. That way, we're held accountable to what we just signed. We can't say that we didn't know what's in it.
Mhm.
And at the same time, if there's pork in it, the American people are going to know and they're
Yeah.
going to see. And they have a
Yeah.
chance to call us and complain or to tell us to pass it. And that's what it needs to come down to is we need to be accountable to the people. No more passing stuff to the executive branch so they can write an executive order and we can use because that's what Congress does. Every time it doesn't want to do something, it allows the executive branch to gain power, because
Mhm.
everything the executive branch does it's not supposed to do is gaining power in the executive to be able to do things in effective law which are not law.
Yeah. That they
And
do that a lot.
that
Yeah.
is a distinct problem. Even if pre following administrations uphold the executive order, it is still against the law most of the time because they
Mm.
don't hold legislative power. So you are punishing people and jailing people under the effective law, even though you violated every statute that exists and the entire structure of of how a law is made and passed in the first
Yeah.
place.
Well,
And
what you're
Congress gets reelected because we pass the buck to the president.
right. Well, what you're touching on is the idea, or the concept of Congress passing off the specifics of creating legislation to
Mhm.
an administrative agency, and whether it's the executive branch or one of these other, the Department of Health and Human Services. I'll never forget when Obamacare was passed. So many provisions in that bill, which was signed into law by President Obama, began with the words "the Secretary shall," meaning the
Yeah.
Secretary of Health and Human Services shall
Yep.
promulgate rules and regulations to address whatever topic area has been delegated to them, to that department, to address. And so
Mhm.
Congress passes off its legislative responsibility to an administrative agency that many conservatives and even libertarians will question the constitutionality of that entire system. And I think there are significant problems with the idea of an administrative agency. But they pass that off, and then you've got these rules that are promulgated by these highly politicized administrative departments that don't serve the people. And these are unelected officials promulgating rules, um, and there's just no accountability. There's no direct accountability between congressmen and congresswomen and the voters, because they pass that off under that system, and I've
Mhm.
always found that to be highly problematic.
It is. It is because if we were doing our job, we should be legislating less
Mm-hmm.
and be far more effective in the thing and focused in the things that we do legislate.
Mm-hmm.
Because the effective legislation at the federal level, it needs to be accomplished by the individual states. Each locality is different, each state is different. That's the reason
Right.
why we are structured as a republic the way that we are,
Mm-hmm.
in a very federalist structured society. That's the reason why this nation was built the way that it is. We should be talking to these agencies who do all have all this professional research prior to making a law in the first damn place, so the rules and everything are finite and within the law. Like perfect example, ATF has the ability to control language,
Right.
the definitions of what is a rifle, what is a pistol, what is a shotgun, so on and so forth. What is a semi-automatic? What can and can't be sold? What is a machine gun and all that? And basically, what you've created is this endless nightmare of regulations that are not congruent with each other on very often, that are very often not congruent with each other, and they put the American citizen in a situation where, they say, you probably break 3 felonies a day.
Yeah.
They say we all break 3 felonies a day. Imagine a system that has so many different laws and regulations that that's actually a reality.
Do you know how
That
many do you know how many federal administrative agencies there are?
If I remember correctly, there are over 403 agencies, sub-agencies, and sub-sub-agencies
Well,
in the
shit, that
federal
was like
government.
I wasn't expecting you to answer that, but you're right. You're in the ballpark. It's somewhere north of 400, and
Yeah.
people don't know that. People have no idea how expansive this federal bureaucracy is, and we've allowed it to get to that. We have all these departments doing God knows what the hell, and
No, we're
legislating so
constantly
many aspects of
expanding the
our lives from the
definition.
federal level that it's and that's never what our republic was intended to be structured as. It was never intended to be
Yeah.
this way.
We're constantly expanding the definitions and mandates of these organizations. It's like, well, I don't want to have to do this, so I'm going to give you more power to do it in my stead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't trust government. I don't trust government, period, because one-off solutions do not solve local problems.
Mm.
When people ask me how I'm going to solve the local water problem, say at Pease Air National Guard Base, I'd say that's a federal and a state issue. That's something I can work on. But when they
Mhm.
say, how are you going to solve the water issue in Salem? I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm a
Yeah.
federal legislator. That's right. That's not my job.
Yeah.
That's actually
No,
the exact
that's a
opposite
good
of my
point.
job. We have state legislators and town councils and waterworks who are supposed to deal with exactly that.
Mhm.
So that's the problem we get in is we're not asking our candidates the right questions. So we
Right,
send people to DC unvetted.
right.
We send them to DC unvetted, and they have no solutions, but they all talk a damn good game,
Yeah.
like
Um,
used car salesmen.
they're at times they're indistinguishable. What
Well, they get us
um
emotional by talking about how bad Democrats are and how bad Joe Biden is, which is what happened at CPAC a couple weeks ago. 4 days of confirmation bias and talking about how bad Democrats are and how bad Joe Biden is. And only one man in the entire weekend went up there and said, we have issues on our own side we need to fix in order
mm,
to save the country.
mm,
And this is how we move the ball forward. One guy out of over 50 speakers, and every major heavy hitter in the conservative movement was there.
yeah.
That is disturbing to me because that was a nationally televised event. Every
Mm,
media company in the country was there covering it and reporting on it. That would have been the perfect time to show not what the corporate structure, which is what the Republican Party is. You have the principles of conservative governance and social conservatism. You have the movement, which is supposed to be moving society in that direction and levying politicians to do it. And then you have the Republican Party, which is basically a corporate structure built on what is supposed to be the foundation of the movement, and that's what the
mm,
platform plays are supposed to represent.
right.
And we have too many people who confuse being a Republican with being conservative. The two are not directly, as we talked about Mitch McConnell, John McCain and Mitt Romney. The two are not directly linked, and we
I
need to
I,
stop making that assumption.
I
That
agree. I usually call
and
myself
we
a
need,
conservative, not a Republican. Not
yeah, and we
necessarily a
need to stop
Republican. And
allowing people to run off their proximity to other people.
yeah.
Like I try to make the point as salient as physically possible. Being close to Donald Trump, knowing Donald Trump, being in pictures with Donald Trump does not make you the next Donald Trump. It doesn't make you a valid candidate. In no way qualifies you for office.
Right.
And I want to be very clear. Mary Magdalene was close to Jesus Christ. Does not make her my Lord and Savior or someone who should be worshiped.
It's a
Judas
valid
was
point.
close to Jesus Christ. He also
Mm,
betrayed Jesus Christ. How many
hmm.
people were in the Trump White House that betrayed him or who were there just to
I'm losing
further their
count at
agenda?
this point. I'm losing count.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So
taxes.
we need to stop us confusing proximity with qualifications.
I think yeah, I think that's a very valid point. I wanted to ask you about your views on taxation. When I looked at your website, looked at your the explanation for your many policy positions. I take it that you believe the tax code is extremely complicated, and you would rather a more simplified system of
Very
taxation.
complicated. That's a part of my economic revitalization plan is I want to strip down the tax code to a uh, flat tax. I want to get rid of the payroll tax, and I want to get rid of the majority of the gas taxes and things like that at the federal level. I want to get rid of, in general, I want to take it down to a flat tax, 10% across the board, no matter what your income, and start that income, not a gradual,
Mhm,
but start the tax bracket at $30,000 a year. So that excludes your homeless people, your part
mm,
time workers, and your high schoolers. So if you start the tax bracket at $30,000 a year, a flat $10,000 deductible per adult, and a $3,000 deductible per child. I go maximum 3 children because the government should
mm.
not be paying you to make more children, nor should it, nor, but at the same time, we want to make enough children that we can further a culture and pass a culture on and maintain it. So that's the issue is we need to break down how we spend it, and most people wouldn't have a problem paying taxes if they knew what the taxes were for, which
Yeah.
brings me to another point. Bills, especially any funding and allocation bills, need to be line itemed. We need to be able to tell what is in these damn bills.
Mhm.
We need to be able to tell people what is in the bills.
Sure.
So
What
that's an issue. And if we start, and the reason I started the tax bracket $30,000, it really comes down to, you don't tax a guy who is poor and desperate living on the
Mhm.
street. He may bring in $5,000 a year. You don't tax him 10% of his $5,000. That $5,000 is going towards food to
Mhm.
keep alive. What you want is that man to have a ladder to climb to success. You
Mhm.
want that man to build. You want him to grow. Everything that our founding fathers have built this country on was opportunity to succeed. Now, I'm not saying give somebody a handout. I'm saying leave the opportunity for them to climb on their own. And once you start taxing them, you're taxing them at a better situation where they're self sufficient and they do not need government or government services of any kind.
What, um, this idea of a flat tax, politicians have floated the idea for years. I mean, I remember going back to when I was a kid, Steve Forbes ran on it, when he launched a presidential campaign. What has prevented that idea from being more popular? How do you sell that idea, and try to attract more support for it?
Explain to people how the tax code is weaponized against them. I mean, the fact is, the very same politicians who complain about the wealthy not paying their fair share, guess what? They are the wealthy who are not paying their fair share. They hire the same lawyers and accountants to do their stuff.
Right.
These people, these rich, wealthy people, contribute buku dollars to a campaign. Like I said earlier, less than 5% of the country donates. Every time a normal person doesn't donate a dollar, that means we have to go ask Mr. Big Bucks for money. This
Mhm.
allows very wealthy people to leverage politicians. And if you think one side of the aisle isn't engaging in it, both are engaging in it. Both take big bucks in order to get elected in the first place. Both of them are willing to do that in order to get elected. So we need to get rid of it. If you take I don't want to do the pendulum swinging back and forth as it axes more people with each swing. I want to cut the pendulum. I want to take the pendulum out of it. So this
Mhm.
constant raise the taxes, lower the taxes, raise the taxes, lower the taxes. We're going to attack the rich. They're not paying their fair share. Well, the poor aren't paying their fair share. How about we
Mhm.
all pay the same damn thing? You make $1 billion, you pay 10% of $1 billion. There are
Mhm.
still some write-offs and stuff that go with entrepreneurship and investments that will still exist, but they will be plain and easy to understand. The average person
Yeah.
should be able to file their own taxes and shouldn't need to hire an interpreter to be able to tell them what the tax code is. It's
Yeah.
well over 40,000 pages.
Yeah,
That is insane.
it's absurd. It shouldn't have to cost you, I'm a business owner. It shouldn't have to cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars just to file a tax return for 2 or 3 businesses and then for yourself. It's just
Yeah.
the system is so complicated. It's gotten out of control. Um,
Yeah, like
you
I'm a business owner. I like paying my employees well. And
Mhm.
the less government regulations I have, the better I can pay my employees. Because you know what? Happy employees lowers my turnover rate.
Yeah,
A happier
absolutely.
employee lowers my turnover rate to the degree that I can absorb the impact of the cost of wages and the operating costs and still make a profit in order to grow the business. Because if you're not making a profit, your business is dying. You're just prolonging a very slow death, and it's likely going to destroy your relationship with your family and your marriage and so on and so forth
Mm.
with it. And people don't understand, most business owners are not giant corporate structures. They're guys like you and me
They're
who
ones and
live and
twos,
breathe our business.
single
Yeah,
owner LLCs,
yeah.
two business
Like I
partners
was up
together.
until 1 o'clock in the morning filling in for
Yeah.
employees that were out on St. Patty's Day.
Mhm.
And I take pride in the fact that when my employees don't show up to work, I show up to work
Yeah.
because it's my business. It's my name on the door. So
Mm.
that's what it means. And if we make it easy to pay employees more while not raising the cost of living, that's the other issue. We attack wages, but we don't attack the rise in the cost of living, which means we're attacking one side of the equation, but not the other.
Right.
Doesn't matter if I increase your wages if inflation and the cost of living outpace your wages.
Yeah, that's a major problem, and why we y the administration is blaming Putin, Russia, and all sorts of other, masked villains for the rise in inflation. Why do you think inflation is at historic levels?
Inflation, it's a combination of things. Every administration is to blame for the increase in spending. Trump is the only one that tried to cut it, and Mitch
Mhm,
McConnell and Paul Ryan took that ball away from him as soon as he attempted it.
mhm,
But the reality is, um, every administration spends, and that's it's we all have our pet projects.
mhm.
It's the unfortunate reality. I want to cut real spending, not projected increases in spending,
Right,
because that is just no, fill it up. That's it. That's just another lie that we tell voters in order to get elected, to make them think that we're being fiscally responsible, when neither side of the aisle has been fiscally responsible in recent years. Yeah, we've increased revenues, but we've increased spending to match it. So inflation, spending, printing money when we didn't have to. We printed $9 trillion over the course of this pandemic. We flooded the market. Now we're dealing with repercussions of that. Then you
mm,
have real inflation on the cost of living due to oil prices, due to the drop in domestic oil production and uh, energy independence here domestically, which affects shipping costs, transportation costs, not to mention increases material costs, because petroleum products go into uh, everything that we use, plastics and processes and making other things. So even the electricity that comes from our cars comes from natural resources, from
right.
shale and oil and coal. So we're making electricity. We're assuming that by making everything electric that we're going to change things. No, we're actually we still have to use these natural resources to create the electricity in the first place, because
Yeah,
wind and solar are not dependent. In any conversation that focuses on green energy, that doesn't take into account nuclear energy, thorium reactors, salt reactors, and so on and so forth, you were not being honest. We're not being intellectually honest. And
right.
that is the definition of a ball of an issue that is never supposed to be solved. It is supposed to be there for fundraising purposes.
Yeah.
Very much like the immigration problem is there for fundraising purposes, because I can count on one hand the amount of people who has actually tried to solve the problem, and that was Donald Trump. Everybody else pretended to solve the problem.
I agree. Well,
So
I know that,
there's issues.
yeah, no, I agree 100% with that. I know you gotta go. Now you got a family to get to. I want to thank you again for joining me. This has been very, very enlightening. I think you're fantastic, and I wish you the best of luck. What is your website so that the audience knows where to learn more about you and to learn about your positions
Julian.
and what you wanna do?
So it's Julian, the number 4
Mhm.
nh.com.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Julian, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on, and I wish you the best of luck. I'll keep following you for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
God
sir.
bless.
Likewise.